Hello, everyone. I hope you've had a good week in the markets this week. My name is Jake, and my channel is Jake Trades and Invests, where I do a weekly video recapping what's happened in the markets as well as where I think the prices may be headed. So, with that introduction out of the way, let's get started and jump right into our first chart, which is gold. This week, gold did what I talked about it would do last week, where it kind of hit some resistance around the 2960, 2970 level and started to pull back towards the 50 EMA. We had this long run after we broke out of our triangle pattern here, and it was a little extended over the moving averages, so it made sense for gold to kind of pull back and pause for a little bit, and that's exactly what it's done. So in the coming weeks ahead, I would look for gold to maybe hold around the 50 EMA and build a little bit of support. It's possible that we pull all the way back to around the 2770 level to fill this little gap from a few weeks back. But overall, in the short to medium term, gold looks good to continue higher. We're just set up for a short pause in this next phase of the price movement heading upward. For silver, same thing. We broke out of our downward resistance area here, and like gold, silver tends to follow, has pulled back towards the moving averages. Had a little bit of buying coming in on looks like Tuesday and Friday, coming off of the 3140, 3150 area. So I would think price may hold around this area for the coming week or two, build a little bit of support before trending back up. But again, if gold continues to pull back, it's possible silver could come back and test the 200 EMA here, test this support zone coming through. Technically could be a retest of this resistance area down in the 3050 zone. So wouldn't be surprising if it pulled back that far in the coming weeks. But in my opinion, I think that's a good buying opportunity to get into silver. Platinum continued to pull back. Originally, I thought once it tested the resistance zone, it would come back to the $1,000 support area. We have broken through that with some pretty heavy momentum, and we're back below the moving averages. So looking at a longer term picture, we've got a lot of support coming in around 900 to 915, 920, somewhere in there. I think platinum should find some more buyers stepping in around that support area. That zone is held up for several years now, so no reason to think otherwise this time around. But it could also break below it as a false breakdown before heading higher. That's always a possibility. So we'll just wait and see what price does if it starts approaching that support zone. As for copper, we've been watching this one. The other week it pulled back after hitting the resistance zone that I had talked about around 480 to 490. It pulled back down, came back to around 450, which is what I said it would do, and had a pretty strong day on Tuesday before heading back towards the 480 on Wednesday, and then a strong selling day Wednesday. And we're kind of consolidating sideways to end the week. I think as long as copper can stay above 450, maybe pause for a week or two, let the moving averages catch up, build a little bit of support, I think copper looks great to head higher in the short to medium term. As for crude oil, we're still hanging around our $70 support zone. Looks like we're having some buyers starting to step in here a little bit at a time with these green candles. Had a pretty strong buying day on Thursday and a hammer candle to end the day on Friday. One thing to note, we are still below the moving averages, so we're still trending down. But if price can bounce back up towards 74, test the resistance zone, maybe pull back a little bit above the moving averages and hold, I think oil looks good to head higher. But if we start to see the price coming further down into the support zone and even breaking below, that could be some area or a reason for concern for price to head a little lower. Natural gas over the last couple of weeks has kind of been all over the place. We talked about it last week how we had some really strong days uh, to push the price back up towards 430, 440 before selling towards the end of the week last week. And now we've had some more selling going into this previous week as well. We are above the moving averages, so if price can kind of stabilize a little bit above the moving averages, that would be great. It could be a buying opportunity for price to head higher, but right now, the natural gas price is just kind of getting whipped around and kind of hard to trade right now. So trade it with caution is what I would say here. As for the S&P 500, um, we have come down. It looks like we're kind of testing this area here where we were flagging, the other month, beginning of the year here. We had broken out, kind of tested the resistance area a few times before heading higher, hit all-time highs 2 weeks ago before having a pretty strong selling week this week. It looks like Friday we had a pretty big bullish piercing candlestick here, but we are below the 20 and the 50 EMAs. So it's possible again that price may continue to come on down towards this 5,700 level, maybe retest this support zone. I'm going to extend that out now just to see if we end up coming down and testing that. That would put us back into this flag pattern, which isn't really relevant at this point. But it would make a little bit of sense for price to come down, test this support zone, test the 200 EMA, and maybe take a couple of weeks to build some support here. I could see that happening. So my guess is that price may bounce around here a little bit around 6,000 before heading lower into the next week or two. And most likely price is going to head towards that 5,700 level. As for the Nasdaq, kind of the same story. We had broken out, had a pretty strong selling week this past week with a large buying candle on Friday. I had talked about previously that we have this gap back here around 20,200 that hasn't been filled yet. So that kind of coincides with the 200 EMA and possibly this support zone around 20,000. So if the S&P continues to fall, the Nasdaq continues to fall, it kind of all lines up with this $20,000 mark in the Nasdaq. I think would be a good buy point if prices can stabilize in the Nasdaq in the coming weeks. For the Dow Jones, we had come back down to our support zone here that's been there for a couple of years. Looks like we did hold above it and had a strong day on Friday. That's a good sign for the Dow. However, with the other indices falling, there could be some weakness in the Dow in the coming weeks. So let's just continue to keep an eye on the Dow around these prices. If it were to come down to 43,000 or even a little below that to 42.5, again, we have this gap from the beginning of the year that hasn't been filled yet. So it's possible we may bounce around this week and fall a little bit lower, come down, fill this gap, test the 200 EMA before finding a good buying point. So we just need to keep an eye on it and see what's happening in the next couple of weeks. And for the Russell, we did break below our support zone. It looks like we may bounce back up and retest the support area, test the EMAs, but price is below the EMAs right now, so it's not looking too strong. We tend to, when we've had some strong selling, we'll have a little bit of a bounce. So if you want a really short-term play, you could maybe play the upside for a couple of days towards the 20 or the 50 EMA and retest this support zone that has now broken. But with the price below the EMAs, it's not really indicating an uptrend anymore. So it's not really a good long-term or even a medium-term buy right now. So let's just kind of watch the price on the Russell and see where it goes. And then lastly, we have Bitcoin. Did what I talked about Bitcoin doing this week. It fell through its support zone, came all the way back to the 200 EMA. It has now filled this 80 or 77,300 ish gap. We're almost there. We had a pretty strong buying day on Friday to end the day and to end the week. But with that much momentum, I think price is going to chop around a little bit, let these moving averages catch up. We may see a little bit of a rebound, come back up and test this, what used to be the support zone. It could now be turned into a resistance area and retest the moving averages that are trending down now. But right now, Bitcoin is not looking too strong.